Alright, what's going on, guys? When it comes to a game like Elden Ring, that was able in no uncertain terms to take over the world for a time, you really have to sit back and ask, is that a one-time thing? They were able to capture lightning in a bottle, create a monumental adventure where it felt like everyone on the planet was playing it at the same time. Most game studios dream of being able to do that once, but we know full well that FromSoftware is perfectly capable of making another game of the same quality as Elden Ring. So today we need to explore the question of, is there going to be an Elden Ring 2? And what do we know about it? What do the signs point to? And if so, when might we expect it? There's a lot to break down from information compiled over the last 2 years, so as we get into all this today, if you want to stay up to date on all things FromSoftware, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's begin. When it comes to discussing the prospect of Elden Ring 2, there is a big elephant in the room that we have to address, and it came from an interview that Miyazaki gave right before the release of the DLC that talks about this exact question, where the interviewer asked, "Final question on the topic of Shadow of the Erdtree, but do you envision this as the end of Elden Ring's story, or is there room for either more DLC or an Elden Ring sequel in the future?" To which he responds, "We don't want to say this is the end of the Elden Ring saga for now. I think we said a similar thing at the end of Dark Souls 3. We didn't want to flatten those possibilities or put a pin in them just at that time. And it's a similar story with Elden Ring. We don't want to discourage the possibilities for that. There might be more ideas in the future. We don't have any current plans to make a second DLC or a sequel, but we definitely don't want to snuff out that possibility. We think that there could well be something in the future." Okay, so there's a lot to extrapolate from that. First of all, we know for a fact, Shadow of the Erdtree is the first and last DLC for Elden Ring. There's not going to be more. That's it for this game. So we have to look to the future. And at the time of that interview, there were no plans for another one. And I believe that, because any plans they had on expanding Elden Ring would have been used for the DLC. So even if they were going to make a sequel, it's back to square one. Now, one thing we know about FromSoftware and how they operate, they have multiple teams working on different projects at the same time, which is why we had Armored Core 6 release in between the initial release of Elden Ring and the DLC. So there are likely other priorities at the moment to finish up, whether that be another Armored Core game or another RPG, potentially not directed by Miyazaki, which is something he stated many times is going on at the studio, allowing other directors to come forward and make their games, while he focuses on more expansive projects. So both can simultaneously be true, that there are currently no plans, but there may very well be in the future. Because the thing that sets Elden Ring apart from every other game that we've talked about before, and the other potential sequels that they could do in their franchises, is money. Because Elden Ring sold over 25 million copies, and brought in billions in revenue. And we recently just discussed how the DLC contributed to the most profitable quarter ever for Bandai Namco. So much so that they had to issue an apology for their profit projections being too low, and update them to reflect even more money coming in. So to say that Elden Ring is a cash cow is a bit of an understatement. This is abnormal in every regard possible. Now, when you compare that to Armored Core, which is a different genre but still a FromSoftware game, Armored Core 6 sold around 3 million copies, which is still very successful for a video game, but a massive downgrade from Elden Ring. And a number of factors go into that, such as mech games being a niche genre, it having a number 6 on the end, which may deter players from picking it up as their first installment to the franchise. But at the end of the day, numbers are numbers, and the stakeholders at FromSoftware are going to want to replicate that wild success. Now, Miyazaki has stated several times that monetary success isn't the metric they use to determine what they're going to make next. But at the end of the day, there is a business, and the shareholders are the primary concern. So the demand is high, and the right people are going to want it. Now, even if you don't like the sound of that, and it could be disingenuous to FromSoftware's desires, I don't think they're particularly out of line here, especially when we put it next to what Miyazaki sees as his ideal game. For the immediate future, I think how fans have responded to our games, and I dare say the amount of trust they've placed in us as a brand, has provided us with this opportunity to be able to show different types of value that we can add. So I think our job at this point is to not betray that trust and expectation. On an individual level, however, the sense of overcoming challenges and the dark fantasy world setting is something I will always have, but I don't necessarily think that will always be the direction of the company, because others might feel differently. So he states very clearly right there that the style of game that Elden Ring is and the games they've made so far are exactly what he wants to make. He also stated that making a game as large and ambitious as Elden Ring was obviously not without its troubles. It was a challenging and long process, but it was also extremely fun as a creator. I'd love to recreate that experience for myself more than anything. Every time with these games, there's things that go well and there's things that don't go so well. With Elden Ring, it's the same. That two-way process, the communication with the players, has been really good this time. I feel it's something we've managed to lock into a little better. better. So taking those bits that didn't go so well this time with Elden Ring and incorporating those and improving those in a future title, that's something I'm really excited for. So what he's saying there is, even though Elden Ring was such an ambitious project and took everything they had in the studio, that's the fulfilling experience he wants as a game director. And we've heard before Miyazaki say directly that Elden Ring was not his ideal fantasy RPG. He said it was close, but not quite at that stage. So it does seem inevitable, based on everything we've talked about so far, that they will tackle another expansive, dark fantasy RPG. But we do have to ask, is there even room for an Elden Ring 2 in the story? Well, personally, I would be pretty disappointed if we never got another Elden Ring game. The world they crafted here was excellent. It's one of my favorite fantasy worlds I've ever encountered. But when I played through Shadow of the Erdtree, I wasn't totally satisfied to leave things there. There are still so many unanswered questions and aspects of the lore that didn't get explored, and while that is typical for FromSoftware, that means there's still plenty of room to explore. There are lots of major players in the Elden Ring universe that didn't show up in the game. We know of other distant lands. They could take a Dark Souls 2 approach and create a game in one of those places, showcasing how the events of the first game impacted the greater vision of the world. And while Queen Marika's story may be over, and her demigod children, with all the other endings of the game, there's still possibilities to explore there as well. So I don't think it would be fair to say there's not more lore to explore, or new stories to create in this world. If anything, I think if they did create another dark fantasy RPG with new lore, then it may just end up repeating a lot of the same themes and tropes as either the Elden Ring universe or the Dark Souls universe. So all that to say, there's still story here. Now, in the best case scenario that they do actually decide to pursue an Elden Ring 2 down the line, when could be the soonest we see that? Well, personally, I wouldn't get my hopes up much at all for that to be anytime soon, because as we talked about a bit earlier, FromSoftware is likely working on other games at the moment, games not directed by Miyazaki that the other teams have been chipping away at. For example, I'd put some money down on either Armored Core DLC or another Armored Core game being the next installment, because even though it didn't do Elden Ring numbers, it was still widely considered a success and actually beat their expectations. Not to mention that they have actively confirmed that the Armored Core franchise will continue. After that, I'd bet we get some kind of spin-off game, another RPG not directed by Miyazaki that isn't tied to a set universe, kind of like Sekiro or Bloodborne. A more compact adventure, not on the same scale as Elden Ring, but still providing that FromSoftware signature. Then maybe after that, if Elden Ring 2 is real, that's when they would start telling us about it. Because realistically, if they were to start development today, that's still probably a 3 to 5 year development process, and that may actually be being generous. But we'd have lots of great games in the meantime. So I don't think it's right to say that an Elden Ring 2 definitively won't happen. I think if anything, the signs actually point to it being more likely than not. Even though it will probably be a very long time before we actually hear it, I do think the world of Elden Ring will be visited again. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think we'll get an Elden Ring 2 no matter how far off it is? Or is it truly over and done? Y'all let me know. Either way though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.